The market here sort of leaning towards reposado. Back during apartheid, we introduced some laws in the country to protect the brandy industry. South Africans, I would say only in the last 10 or 15 years, have been introduced to true tequila, traditionally made.
Hello and welcome to the Tequila Business Channel. My name is Adam Fodor, I'll be your host, and joining me, my good friend Keegan Smith from South Africa. He is our vice president for the ITA project there, and he is a tequila sommelier doing lots of tequila tasting events and educational organizational events, basically for many, many brands. Welcome to the show, Keegan. How are you doing?
Thank you, Adam. Good to be here, and I love the new channel. I think it's much needed.
Nice. Thanks so much for that. And just to get started, would you mind introducing yourself? It's a lot better than if I was doing that.
Sure. So my name is Keegan Smith. I'm an ITA Tequila Sommelier, and I'm the Vice President for Southern Africa. Currently, we're the only representatives of the ITA or any tequila body, for that matter, in Africa, with an exploding market this side, introduction of a lot of new products. So that's fantastic. Growing every day, and hopefully won't stop growing.
Nice. Thanks so much. I appreciate all that. And if you care to share with us, like, how did you get into the tequila business? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but you're also a few times like flair bartender, champion in the region. So tell us a little bit about that, and how did you get into this?
So I started bartending in 2001, I think, and my introduction into the industry was through flair bartending. At the time, it was really the only thing that you could do to advance your career. There was no such thing as mixology or anything like that. Well, if it was in its infant stages. I took that quite seriously. I won a couple of championships with that for South Africa. And then over the past 21 years, I've worked in numerous bars, actually too many to mention. Just working with spirits closely. I've worked also very closely with the South African craft spirits industry as a consultant to them. The tequila, I think the love for tequila really started when I started flaring, because it was the drink of choice for flair bartenders. We used to call it a peppy. And every night at about 10 o'clock, when the club started to vibe and things were starting to get busy, we were running 3, 4, 5 deep. We would all have a peppy to get us in the mood, and it kind of started from that. That, of course, was Jose Cuervo, and I had no idea back then what tequila was, or I just knew that I liked the taste of it. And then over the years, I started, researching into tequila more, and started kind of specializing more on the tequila side. And as you know, Adam, as soon as you start down that little tequila path, it kind of grabs you and it just pulls you down,
Yeah, I know, exactly right. I think a producer friend of mine, Sophie, was saying, like, it just bites you, the culture, tequila and everything, and you just get involved. So totally get what you're saying, and it's great to have a chat with you, because I think I can talk from everyone else or most people who are interested in tequila that we know very little about South Africa in general. So you're very far away from North America, whereas 80% of all global tequila is sold pretty much. And I've seen the market is growing really well. And actually, I was able to get some interesting stats from the CRT's website, which is kind of like the 100% agave and mixto share is kind of almost equal, somewhere in the range of, I believe, like 1.1 million liters for each. And there's an interesting, curious fact as well, that most of the tequila you guys seem to consume over there is reposado. So something like 2/3 of all the market is reposado, and then almost all the 1/3 is blanco, and the rest is kind of almost non-existent. And it's almost the same share across like tequila mixto and or category tequila and then 100% agave. So how do you see this? And would you mind explaining just through what do you guys enjoy over there and how?
I mean, the answer to that is pretty simple. South Africa, just by the way, is we've got a long history with agave spirits ourselves. Um, we've been producing it for many years because they grow all over South Africa, but not the blue agave. We mostly see the blue Americana. We see the Espadin. Those kind of varieties. There's actually only one parking lot where I found actual agave tequilana. So
Nice.
I was very excited about that, and nearly caused a pile up when I was taking photos and everything. But the market here, sort of leaning towards Reposado. You must understand that back during apartheid, we introduced some laws in the country to protect the brandy industry, where they said that a spirit must be 43% ABV or higher. Also, bottling had to be in a 750 ml bottle. As you know, the global standard is 700 mils. Global standard on ABV is 40 mils. 40%. So that really constricted the amount of alcohol that could be imported into the country because it didn't fall into the spirit category. Once the apartheid government went out, the new government put in legislation to allow for a different category, which is the spirit aperitif category, and that allows for spirits to be under that 43% minimum threshold. So at the time, we only had the really big brands, obviously being Cuervo or Maker, those guys with the mixed store products, and obviously the mixed stores loaded up with avocados, very sweet, and that's how the taste for tequila developed in South Africa. So, South Africans, I would say, only in the last 10 or 15 years have been introduced to true tequila, traditionally made non-additive tequila. And that's why the industry is growing so much. But they still retain that sweet palate, and the market is still quite young here, so they struggle with the complexity of a blanco. But it takes education, tastings. The more courses that we do here in South Africa, the more people that we introduce to quality tequilas. Of which we don't have the greatest range here yet, but it is growing consistently. We've probably got about 200 or 300 brands now available in South Africa. Where if you look at global, at 1,600 brands is really just a drop in the bucket, but we're getting there. We're getting there. So the more people
Nice.
we introduce to the more traditional tequilas, the more that demographic is going to shift. I truly
Mhm.
believe that because we have such good feedback at the tastings, especially with the blancos, where you explain to them exactly what they're tasting, and once they know that, then they open up to it. And most of the people that we've done tastings for have switched over to blancos, as opposed to reposados and the anejos, which is great. I mean, that's the essence of tequila, is the blanco.
Yes, correct. I agree with you, and it's very interesting to see, as I was saying, all these stats. And to me, what also popped into my mind is that maybe you guys also like drinking these sort of spirits neat, perhaps, or is there any other thing? Because obviously, for example, for the most other parts of the world, part of the reason why I believe people consume more blanco because it's cheaper as well, and you can just easily throw it into a cocktail or something, and it doesn't really even matter to a certain degree, especially if it's a mixed or like a category tequila. So do you guys drink it neat or do you drink it with a cocktail?
So South Africans are we're drunkards in this country. There is a massive shooter culture, and that's really how tequila
Okay.
took its legs in this country. So
Yeah.
we are also completely frozen. They'll take. I've seen it many times here where they'll take a quality tequila like Tequila Ocho, and they'll jam it in the freezer and shoot it with salt and lime, and that's something that we're trying to fight here. I will say though that blanco tequilas are the preferred cocktail mixer when it comes to tequila in South Africa, and the mixologists are really sort of pushing the envelope. They're also introducing a lot more mezcal. So the mixology sector is pushing, just as hard as we are in terms of tequila, and that's I find is a good introduction to it. Um, I'd say with cocktails, I've got a mixed opinion about it. I'd say cocktails, depending on the makeup of the cocktail, if it's a spirit forward cocktail or if it's a fruit punch type cocktail, at the end of the day, you've got to be very careful about what you use. You can use a very expensive, traditionally made Blanco in, in one of these tropical fruit punches, but you lose the spirit completely. So you might as well just use a mixer.
Hmm.
So I prefer, and I do push on this end that, the consumers are taught, educated, and then introduced to drinking tequila the right way, which is, room temperature neat. But in order to fight that shooter culture that's ingrained in pretty much every South African, we have to, it's baby steps, and so instead of freezing it, I recommend rather put it into the fridge, if you
Yeah.
want it more
Fair
chilled.
enough.
Don't
Yeah.
freeze it, especially like Ocho with, not being chill filtered, it does get quite cloudy and stuff. And then people complain that it's
Yes.
not a quality product because they just don't understand.
Interesting. Yeah. So you do get that in South Africa. I mean, I didn't think, but of course you can get some nice cold winters. I assume, and even that would be a like you go outside and then it's what's this sort of haziness doing in my bottle, right? That you don't even have to put in the freezer, right?
Yeah, exactly. Look, I mean, our winters, especially where we are, interestingly enough, we're about the same height as Los Altos. We sit
Ah,
at about 1,900 meters above sea level, so we're very high up.
okay.
And our climate pretty much is copy paste for Mexico.
Uh-huh.
We're also southern hemisphere. We have very hot summers. We have coldish, cold winters. We've got snow in a lot of parts in the
Hmm.
country, especially on the mountains. So temperatures here can sort of range between, I'd say, like 10 degrees and -5. I've never really seen it go below
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
But yeah, it really depends on what's happening. But I find that, if it's a bit of a culture shock for people if you're saying don't put it in the freezer, drink at room temperature, which here is 25 to 30 degrees. Um, it's a bit of a shock for them. So
Yeah.
it's easier to transition them out of that shooter culture just by saying, okay, well, don't freeze it, rather just chill it, and then try it like that. And then once they kind of get used to that ideology, then we can start moving towards the room temperature.
Okay,
Um,
makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
but in the tasting, we obviously introduce it to them properly. We do it at
Yeah.
room temperature. We don't chill or anything like that, and we do it neat.
Sure, I've heard, and your room temperature, as you mentioned, it can be fairly low as well, depending on the time of the year. So it's absolutely a fine thing, I guess. I
Yeah,
just
so
wanted to
right
ask
now
as
we're
well.
actually heading into winter. So now in the mornings we're looking at around 10 degrees, 8 degrees
Mm.
around there. When we get into the height of winter, when I wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning, it's we're running at about -1.
Yeah, nice. Wow. Yeah, fair enough. So what I wanted to ask you, Keegan, is how easy or hard is it to get into South Africa as a tequila brand, for example? Like, as you mentioned that 43% ABV rule, but is it still in place? And once you're able to import your product into the country, how easy it is to get distribution? Because I remember you telling me that even some very small companies are doing some sort of distribution for some small brands that aren't even in the spirit industry. So would you mind sharing some stories about that with us?
Sure, sure. So look, most of the time, and you'll notice on like Tequila Ocho, for example, it'll have a secondary label, so a third label on the bottle, which will have the South African distributor, and then it'll also have the legal category of it, which is spirit aperitif. So it falls into a different taxing bracket, as opposed to a spirit. In terms of getting into the country, it's actually very easy. The South African economy wants new products. It is a growing economy, so they do want new products to come through, especially when the industry is showing them that the trend is developing. We've just seen now the sort of culmination of a six plus minus years trend of gin in this country, and it just exploded. We now, we started out just with the mainstream gin brands like Bombay Sapphire, Tanqueray, those guys. Now
Mhm.
we've got about 220 South African producers. I mean, there's not even enough room on the shelves. So
Wow.
that was a nice long trend that we saw for gin, but now it is coming to an end. People are pretty much ginned out, and it's creating a vacuum in the industry, which tequila is now filling. And that's thanks large in part to the celebrities driving the spirit as well.
Mhm.
So with the celebrities driving the spirit, people want to be seen with it. And mostly in the nightclubs with the really rich individuals, you're looking at the Clase Azuls and the 818. Don Julio 42, those kind of drinks. But I find that I would say the working class is waking up a lot more to quality traditionally made tequilas, and it's creating a need for the distributors to bring it in. So in recent years, we've seen Cascahoin come into the country. We've seen Tequila Ocho. We're still waiting for El Tapatio. Hopefully that comes soon. But yeah, we've got the celebrity brands 818, Casamigos, Casanoble, Solento by Kelly Slater, where they state that it's organic, which most tequila really is organic. Yeah, so we're seeing a lot more products come in, which is fantastic, and more of the traditionally made tequilas. If you look at the market share up until this point, the big fish was Cuervo, Olmeca, Espolon. Those were kind of the big players, but now obviously Don Julio as well. But now at the bars that I've introduced quality products to compete with that, because Don Julio is actually very highly priced in South Africa. It's about
Okay.
1,000 rand. Yeah, it's about 1,000 rand,
Okay.
just over 1,000 rand at retail. And for example, you can get a bottle of Tequila Ocho Reposado for 200 rand or about 100 rand cheaper. So, which is, as we know, in my opinion, a far better tequila. So, once we introduce people to it and teach them that you don't have to drink expensive tequila to enjoy a good tequila. Actually, quite the opposite. That then opens up the market for more traditional products, and that's why the sort of smaller distributors are looking at brands like Viva Mexico, Atanasio, like the RTA courses for. We've seen a lot of interest for that. Sangre de Vida with the skull bottles. We've already got car tequila here as well. So yeah, I think it's quite an exciting time to be in tequila here in South Africa.
And just an interesting thing, because you mentioned something that sparked my interest to getting to know more. So you said, because we do have a few courses with IT about the brands, and you're saying that it has a direct correlation, that people are like, hey, like what are these brands, like, we want to import them, right? And so it actually does have that sort of factor, because you guys are far away, people haven't heard about them, but with these courses being available, especially now for free, like people are talking about these brands, even though it's not even on the market, you say.
Yeah, 100%. I mean,
Awesome.
I was in a conversation the other day where somebody brought up G4 tequila by Felipe Camarena. And I mean, we don't, you'll find that in certain bottle stores, they had to parallel import it. It's retailing it for like 5,000 rand a bottle. It's ridiculous. But, the fact that they're even mentioning it without it being in the country shows that the education aspect of tequila is growing in South Africa, and I mean, you and I both know, Adam, that tequila is very much an educational product as well as an agricultural product. So, you need to, I wouldn't say you need to learn about it to enjoy it, but it certainly makes it much better. And it's such an interesting topic, the traditions, the cultures, the people, the spirit itself, the complexity of the spirit, the highest, the most complex spirit in the world. I was watching an interview with you, in fact, with Carlos Camarena, and he was saying that a mosto, an agave mosto has got up to 450 different chemical compounds. And if you compare that to other mashes or fermentations, they range between 200 and 250. So that shows the crazy complexity of the spirit, and we need to educate people on what to expect, how to drink it, and how to enjoy that complexity, because in South Africa, the word smooth is all too popular, and you can't really apply that to tequila. Tequila is not necessarily smooth, it's a quality spirit, but it's extremely complex. And that's why also I think, coming back to your previous question with reposados, I think that's where the correlation sort of turns into, we're a whiskey and brandy market, essentially. Apart from the trends, and they'll gravitate towards a barrel aged tequila because it's more familiar.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, that's what I thought. And thanks for explaining. There are quite a few countries that are just, there's more gear to the aged spirit, and even many of the industry friends of mine, or people that I've just recently interviewed, they also agree with you in a sense that most people are starting from bourbon, because even Americans are like bourbon lovers, and they start from the añejo tequila, and they usually work their way back to the blanco, and then just Patrick in the other interview that I we just published, he mentioned it's so weird that with tequila, when you study more, you usually start with the higher end stuff, or like the more expensive things, like the añejo or even extra añejo, and then it actually gets cheaper. Versus, let's say, you start with wine or beer, it's usually the opposite way around. It gets more expensive, right? Yeah.
100%. I found that. I mean, once you dive into tequila and you really, really start taking an interest in learning about it, I found that
Mhm.
the not really reposados. I'd say the anejos and the extra anejos for me are a bit too wooded. I don't enjoy that flavor, so much anymore. I prefer a light aged reposado, in a very used barrel, so that wood isn't interfering much with the complexity of the agave, and most of the time I'll gravitate towards Blanco. Blanco is the truest essence of tequila, and it's where you can really sort of judge the tequila properly.
Of course, yeah, but like as we discussed, the market in South Africa is still geared towards more like the heavier whiskey, brandy, kind of cognac style, and I would imagine that some of the most popular tequilas would carry that. I mean, actually, what do you think is kind of the most popular tequila over there, or the top three? You think, like, best selling tequila? You think that everyone's buying and consuming the bars?
And I would say, because of the nightlife, the nightlife industry in South Africa is huge. It's
Mhm.
absolutely massive. Um, I would say the number one sort of top tequila here would definitely be Don Julio. You'll find
Mhm.
that in 90% of all bars, restaurants, pubs, clubs. Obviously not the lower end bars and nightclubs, where they're just kind of slinging cheap drinks, but anything sort of, I don't know, middle tier or higher, you'll find your Don Julios, also your 42s and the more high end
Mhm.
establishments. And then from there, Espelon does very, very well here as well. So Espelon's a great one. I like to try and push guys more towards Espelon, as opposed to, the mixed brands that have their place as well. And those guys will take sort of third and fourth place, with Jose
Mhm.
Cuervo Especial and Olmeca Black, those kind of products. So, personally, I do try to educate people to. I always like to say there's no such thing as a bad tequila. There's just different tequilas for different occasions. So, if you want to get rat faced and just fall over drunk, by all means, grab a mixer, put it in the freezer, grab the salt and lime, go crazy,
Mhm.
But if, your son is graduating high school and you want to have a celebratory drink, then you want to go for a nice traditional tequila. If you want to flex at a wedding, you pull out the Clase Azul or the 42 or the Avion Reserva. So,
Yeah, fair enough.
different scenarios where tequilas match perfectly with those scenarios. I'm certainly not a snob. I'll tuck into Olmeca or Cuervo if I need to. If the
Sure.
occasion calls for it. Lucky for me, I work very closely with the brand, so I'm quite spoiled for choice when it
Yeah.
comes to tequila, and I usually have a lot kind of on hand.
Mhm.
But yeah, look, I think I'd say top four here would be Don Julio, Espelon, Avion's climbing up there slowly, but not quite up at the top, and then obviously your Cuervos and your Olmecas.
And now that you just mentioned, I only want to add something, in a sense that I think a lot of people just don't understand, because they don't necessarily come from the spirits industry like you do. But if you draw a comparison, let's say, between, I don't know, whatever vodka that you have, like even your average mixed tequila, like a Cuervo, is probably around the same level in quality than some of the highest levels of vodka, right? Because for vodka, you generally need to even add glycerin and all sorts of stuff to kind of make it balance somehow, because you have like at least 95% ABV, as it's coming off the still, and typically they use really cheap ingredients. I mean, not every vodka, but compared to that, I think, and to many other category potentially, it's just not very dissimilar. And and people are choosing the category, right? And tequila is a fun category to choose.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me to the currently in South Africa, um, I've seen a lot of local agave spirit producers kind of popping up, and I work very closely with them to try and fine tune spirits, and because they all want a tequila uh, competitor, essentially, so an agave spirit that can compare to even a poorly made tequila. And one of the biggest problems with that is coming off the gin trend. All these guys are using reflux column stills. They're using copper plates inside there. They're distilling it up to 75, sometimes 80%, and they're losing all of the complexity of that spirit. I have worked with a local agave producer. We dropped the ABV on the second distillate down to 50, and it was night and day. So
Yeah.
so I think that's a common mistake that a lot of guys are making here in South Africa with our local agave spirits. And there's nothing holding us back from producing a world-class agave spirit. It grows like wildfire around here. We've got some beautiful varieties. We've got incredible soil. Up here in Johannesburg, we also have the red clay soil that you find in Los Altos.
Yes.
We've got extremely mineral rich. And then, as people know, we've got some of the best agriculture in the world. So our soil's on par, and we just need to get the techniques. So I try to introduce the age-old techniques, that traditional distillers have been using for hundreds of years in Mexico. Very simple things. I find that people overthink agave spirits a little bit, here in South Africa, and they try to go too fancy. They use a 500,000 rand still, and then I say to them, it's the wrong one. You should have
Yeah,
just
fair
used
enough. Yeah, of course.
a bottle,
Yeah. Yeah, and Keegan, what I was when I was listening, you mentioning everyone's very much bogged down with techniques and like, oh, how can we make it? And what I see is that there is really no branding or no big brands. If you think about it for tequila, and this is something I'm planning on doing just a separate podcast. It has a certain economy. Like there are the big brands, but they are promoting the category itself because if you sell more tequila, if you have a brand that's like 20% of the market, 15%, 30% of the market, they are always going to get customers. So they're like, hey, buy tequila. That's the big brands doing that. And as you're saying, Don Julio is very, very well known. But even before Don Julio, you have Cuervo. So people always have certain big brands that are able to just literally have like millions and millions, even over 100 million if it's necessary, liters of production, and just send it anywhere. And I think in many industries, not just South Africa, agave distillates, but many other, even in my home country, we have Palinka, which is fruit distillates. We don't have any big brands and their money just to go out and promote the whole industry. Because a small brand, you can't do that as a small brand. You don't have the money, you don't have the means, you don't have even the scalability of your product. And I think for tequila, that really works a lot because that's how you started, right? You had the Cuervo, and then now you have Don Julio, which is another big brand now, and then you have whatever Espolón, Avion. But then now you will have the space for the smaller, more authentic or artisanal brands. But because you already had the other ones, you always start with the really crappy stuff, even wine and everything, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And, I totally agree with you. I actually had, I wouldn't say an argument, but I had a kind of back and forth on Facebook a little while ago where, I'm not the biggest fan of mixed tequilas or, overly sweet tequilas. I prefer my blanco traditionally made tequila. I also love mezcal. But you can't say that Cuervo or Olmeca or Don Julio are bad products. You really can't,
No.
because without them, nobody would know what tequila is. In South Africa, especially, the market grew because of Cuervo. Then Olmeca
Sure.
joined the mix, and then the market just took off, and it's only because of that they're getting that liquid to their lips that they then say, okay, well, I like the spirit, let me experiment, let me find out what's it about. And that's when we get the call to do the courses and all of that stuff, and that's when they go to the more premium bottle stores, and they start actually inquiring about the more traditional tequila. So, in my opinion, if we didn't have those mainstream sweet, tequila shot kind of products like
Mhm.
Cuervo, it really wouldn't. The tequila industry, in my opinion, wouldn't be where it is now. Same goes
Yeah.
for celebrity brands. Everybody says, "Oh no, it's another celebrity brand," and yeah, to a certain extent, yes, it is. That's it's getting a bit much, but at the end of the day, the celebrities have got the voice. They're getting that liquid to more people than we could ever dream of. They're doing our
Yep.
job for us. All we have to do is sit back, wait for the market to grow, and then inject into it. And South
Yep.
Africans are very industrious people. So if we like something, we want to build it ourselves. That's kind of how we operate. So that's why just in the past 2 years, I've seen 3 new agave producers popping up here, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot more. So as the segment grows in South Africa, because it is set to be the next trend, and hopefully it lasts just as long as gin, um, it's definitely going to open up a local market. But we've just got to educate people on the production techniques and all of that, because
Yeah.
they're making a lot of mistakes, simple mistakes, things
Sure.
that they don't necessarily have to make.
Sure, sure, I understand. And there was this really nice conversation because now we just have our newest sommelier from Colorado, Ryan, from the Colorado Agave Club. We all welcomed him recently, and he mentioned something really interesting, like with the rising tide. So there's all the ships rise as well, or I don't exactly know the quote, but as the industry grows together, so there's all the brands, because there's always X% of let's say 10% is going to be the really fully authentic, as I would say, and there's always going to be some other percentages for everything else. And if you even compare, let's say, Cuervo to like Don Julio, obviously not only the price category changes, but Don Julio, in my honest opinion, because obviously we don't know how it's exactly made, but what I can imagine is more like a blend of the two worlds. That's what is more likely, because I would be very surprised if they didn't have any of the traditional juice within their product based on the taste. But of course, they have to, how do you say, balance their costs, because they're selling their tequila everywhere in the world, and they're scaling it up. So if you if you stick to the Taonas, there is no tequila for anyone else less Jalisco and the people from there. And then there are certain ways you can expand that. And America maybe, but not even that, I think, because if it was really, really all of the products would be fully traditional. I mean, with the Taona, I think Fortaleza is a great example that they only have that, and they sell out, and I think they make what, like 100,000 liters a year, not much more. And then you start scaling up. I mean, you need to sell, I don't know, 10 times, 100 times more, and then you can grow 100 times, because then it's a large property. It's way too many, it's way too much people to manage. I mean, no one's doing that in any industry, if you think about it. So probably it's just not going to be worth the time, because then there's just isn't enough demand from the people. I mean, if you look at, I don't know how big is craft beer in South Africa, but there's always just a small percentage, much like classical music. Who listens to it. There's always that 5-10% who likes complexity and likes playing with stuff and getting to it really deep. In my opinion, of course, correct me if I'm wrong or if you don't agree with this, but there's always this sort of percentage, and it's really good that we have that. And it's really good that we have like the big huge industry, as you're saying. It's good that you mentioned even the celebrities. I kind of even forgot about them, because they also bring a ton of free advertisement, a ton of free ad for tequila as a category. And of course, you can hate them. I mean, I remember there was a group, like, do you know the band Nickelback? They're Canadian, right? Everyone knows about them, but their career started from hate, because one of the comedians were saying something nasty, and then it became a meme, and everyone was like, "Oh, everyone's like freaking hating Nickelback," and their records were just up in the air, because everyone was talking about them and like, "Hey, let me listen to it." And like, "Oh, you know what? It's not that bad," as they say. So,
Bad.
so
No, they say no press is bad press.
yeah, of
So
course.
as long as people are talking about it, and I think the most important thing in the spirits business in general is getting liquid to lip, getting people to taste the product, in any way, shape, or form, to introduce them to it. A lot of people, especially when we do the tastings, the first time, that the people arrive, they'll always say to me, "Ah, tequila! I had the worst night on tequila. I've had the
Yeah.
worst experience on tequila." And I say to them, but you haven't drunk this tequila. I'm
Mhm.
introducing you now to something completely different. So. And then after the tasting, they always come up to me and they say, I had no idea. That was lovely. It really
Yeah.
tasted great. So um, tequila in this country has got a stigma attached to it of being the party juice, shoot
Mhm.
it down, salt and lemon. And then, there's so many myths about it as well. It makes you high, it comes with a worm in it, it's made from a cactus. I've heard it all. Somebody told me that it was derived from mescaline. I mean, I've
Yeah.
heard a
Well.
couple of so yeah, dispelling the myths, showing them. I mean, most South Africans have got agave growing in their garden. It's such a prevalent plant
Yeah.
here. You can find it anywhere. I can walk 20, 30 meters in any direction and I'll find an agave.
Mhm.
So, when I show them pictures and stuff, they always say, "Oh, is that an agave? Oh my God, I've got one in my garden." So they
Yeah.
they are aware of the product. They don't connect the dots, basically.
Yeah, yeah, I totally understand. And now, thanks for explaining that to me, because it makes even more sense why you have such a huge love actually for Mexican agave spirit. Obviously, it's not even about being Mexican, but about having a proper brand that's producing your agave juice, basically. I mean, compared to the tequila market on or the tequila brands, like what's the biggest agave spirit brand in South Africa? Is there anything that's like a brand in South Africa, agave spirit that people consume? And how does it compare to the tequila spirits? Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest agave spirit currently in South Africa is a product called Leonista.
Mhm.
Um, South Africa is a partner country with Mexico. The Department of Agriculture here actually enforces the denomination of origin. So I came across a distiller in a small town just up the road here who wanted to call his product Tequila, Takeela, and he
Mhm.
got shut down quite quickly by the Department of
Mm,
Agriculture. Said it's way too close, you can't do it. So he had to come up
nice.
with a whole new name. So that's quite
Mm,
nice to know here. That the department is upholding the denomination of origin of tequila and mezcal.
mhm,
Um, but yeah, I'd say the biggest product currently is Leonista, and at the end of the day, it's not the greatest product.
mm,
Um, they use the agave americana. They try and sell it as a blue agave, to the general public.
mm,
But they use the americana. They use column stills. For
mm.
example, in the oven, they build a fire inside the oven, so it's got a
Wow.
really overwhelming kind of off smoky flavor. It lacks a lot of complexity because they're stripping the spirit quite a bit with the reflux stills.
Mm,
So yeah, it's South African agave spirits are not where they should be, not nearly, which
mm,
is strange because we've got such a history with them. I remember during my courses actually with the ITA, I learned that Sophie Deckelbeck used to actually work in
mhm,
South Africa on agave spirits. So we've got a long history of producing agave spirits. So I don't know why that production is not at the level where it should be, but as we work with the local producers and kind of coach them on different aspects of the
mhm.
production, many of these guys don't realize that the cooking, the hydrolysis process doesn't even reach boiling point. These guys are really cooking the agaves. So they
Oh, okay.
they yeah, they're running the inulin sugars and all
Caramelizing.
of that.
Uh-huh. Mm,
So yeah, there's small steps that we can take, but there's nothing that's stopping South Africa from producing a world class agave spirit, given our terroir, given our climate, and the fact that we're an agricultural country. We
mm,
South Africa was built on the back of farming, so we have a country full of really clued up, really good farmers. You
mm.
know, um, I always like to say if Mexico changed the legislation and allowed us to grow their agave, there would never be any
Yeah.
shortage.
Yeah, actually, I can imagine that. I mean, it's already getting there, I think. I see, especially in the US, even in the US, at the southern part, I see a lot of new agave spirit brands and things like that. Like they're trying to even call themselves tequila, but the States isn't as great necessarily. We even have like the alcohol-free tequila alternative, which is again like something in, I guess, in South Africa you wouldn't be able to. Yeah, right. You wouldn't be able to call it like that. I mean, even in Europe, like you just use the word champagne or tequila, and you're like, whatever you use it for, you're just gonna be like, you can throw it out. So it's a little bit different market, but I can see that if the tequila market for whatever reason it would collapse or have some problems, yeah, that would be other markets like South Africa, or even in India, and of course there are plenty of other parts, and especially in even southern parts of the states, I can see more people getting into it because tequila is a category. Interestingly, it brings up every agave spirits. I mean, that's why we have mezcal as well. We wouldn't have mezcal without tequila, but tequila's highlighted brought the whole agave spirit category with it actually. And then it's so interesting that, yeah, you mentioned that even South African agave spirits could have some sort of spotlight. It's just that, yeah, I think the promotion is a very, very huge part of it. The same way, my home country Hungary, there's a lot of wine producers, but no one knows about it as a wine producing country. First of all, we drink most of it, to be fair, especially the better ones. But because we don't have a great sort of promotional system, then of course, it's not going to work. Because in France, for example, they have an amazing promotion system, or even for tequila. I mean, of course, we do have the U.S. consumers to thank for, as you're saying, because it's a huge deal if you have celebrities promoting it. And I think you're right. First of all, a lot of people don't realize that without some of these backing from the big brands and the celebrities, the tequila market could be just the same as the South African agave spirit market. Very local. People just kind of trying to get something out, but only the locals would know about the locally sold kind of things because you live there, so you know all about it. You have the agave in your backyard, but no one else would be interested in, right? Like I don't think so, at least.
And South Africa is known for their brandy. Well, for our brandy, and for our
Ah, okay.
wines. I mean, our
Mhm.
wines are the
Yes.
strongest, most or some of the strongest wines in the world. We range 16, 17, 18% ABV on our wines,
Mm.
as usual. Given the South African culture, and then our brandies. We've taken top awards even at cognac competitions. KWB 20-year-old came up on top at a world cognac
Wow.
competition.
Mm.
So yeah, we've got world class spirits, but South Africans struggle to get out of their comfort zones. So we
Mhm.
need that culture shock. We need that inoculation, that injection. That's
Mhm.
why I said, these brands like Quiver, like Omega, all the celebrity brands, they're pushing the products for us. They're getting people to taste the product. They're getting that conversion, from other spirits over to tequila. And then once they're interested in tequila, I find that they start contacting the right people. That's when we get the phone calls, and they say, "Hey, we want to learn more. We want to do a masterclass. We want to do the course. We want to do a tasting, or whatever the case is." But that introduction would never come to light. It wouldn't come to fruition if it wasn't for these mass produced products. And that's why I say, I think it's a bit unfair for these tequila snobs to go and say, "Oh, I'll never have a mixed or, and I'll die before I drink Clase Azul because it's so sweet." And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, the Mexicans are clever and they cater for a specific market. You
Yep.
can't you
I
can't say
agree.
that that's wrong.
I agree. They do a great business because of that, and this is kind of why we have this channel here, because in the end of the day, it's a business. So you need the sweet stuff as well to get people in, to get people hooked in, as you're saying, or some of the other things, like the cheap stuff as well. By the way, it's also important, and then build brands, build a whole brand for a category, because tequila is a huge brand. And just as a kind of one of my final question, if you will, what do you think? How important is education on a scale of 10? What would you say for that, Keegan?
Just specific to the tequila market.
Yes, correct. Yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
Look, I find that because of the intricacies of tequila, and like Carlos Camarena always says, it's an agricultural product. Um, First of all, we need to overcome the myths of tequila, the cactus myth, the worm myth, all of that stuff. And that really all just comes down to education. So,
Mhm.
with us being the ITA providers for Southern Africa, we've entered the market at a very low price. Because we want to educate more people, we want to get it out there. We want to sell quantity, and quality. But on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say a solid 8 or 9. You know, even if you look at whiskey markets, people want to know about whiskey. They want to know how it's made. They want to know what it's aged in, how long it's aged for. People often say to me, "Reposado is only it's less than a year old," and I said, "Yeah, but you forget the decade that you had to invest in the plant. It's not whiskey where you have an off season and it's okay because you got next year. If you have an
Yeah.
off field, you're gone. You've wasted a decade of time. So I mean, it's very much comparable to a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old in that aspect. So people don't understand that. They don't understand. Or they haven't been educated on the process of making tequila, the fact that it's handed down father to son generationally, the plant, the investment in that agriculture aspect of tequila, and then obviously the production processes, why they use those production processes as opposed to modern production processes, so all of that facilitates. And I find that, I often say, people say that they will enjoy whiskey, for example, and I say enjoy is not actually the right term to use, because
Mhm.
you enjoy Fanta grape or vanilla ice cream, you can take it down by the bucket or 2 liter,
Mhm.
With a spirit, it really comes down to appreciation. And the more you know about that spirit, the more that you can appreciate. So if you know that it was aged in sherry barrels and you retaste that spirit, you can actually then pick it up. You can experience that knowledge that you've just learned through the spirit. And I think tequila is very much tied to that. So when people are experiencing tequila for the first time and they're not educated on the product, they've got all of these myths that have been rolling around for years and years and years, and that is actually influencing what they're tasting and how they're tasting it. So, for example, I don't know if you've ever been to a tasting, Adam, where they say, "Can you taste the citrus?" And you're like, "Well, now I can taste the citrus because you just said citrus, and I'm thinking about
Yeah.
citrus." It's the same, it's the same thing. So guiding people is one thing, but implanting is kind of a whole other thing.
Yeah, I agree. I fully agree with you. And sometimes it even happens to me like the other way around, if you know what I mean. Like feel the agave or something. And so some of the earliest mezcal products that I've tasted, and I'm like, dude, it's just smoke. Oh, but you don't feel that, or you're like, no, and actually it was a terrible product. So yeah, sometimes it's the opposite way around. But I understand what you're saying, and it can also be misleading. But I mean, that's why you're there, and it's so cool, by the way, Keegan, to have you to kind of spread the love and joy. So for those of you guys listening, you can take International Tequila Academy classes with Keegan down in South Africa, because he actually provides them in person. So you can even live through the experience, because normally we only offer it as an online course. But if you happen to live in South Africa, you can just reach out to him and even do like an in person, which of course it's the best. I mean, yes, it's tougher to organize, and for that we're really grateful for Keegan for taking it over in that region. But can you tell us a bit about that? Like how is a tasting slash educational experience with you is?
Yeah, so that's very interactive, Adam. So we do a 4-hour masterclass with
Mm.
everybody and in person. So myself hosting it, where we go through every aspect of the course. We actually explain it in detail. I find that that's a good way to introduce people to it, because if they have any questions, they can ask you off the cuff. You can banter back and forth. I've gotten into a lot of like conversations, just community conversations with classes, and just say, where they're really confused about an aspect or something, and you can actually explain it to them far better. So we do the 4-hour masterclass. There's a tasting element to it as well, where you get to taste the blanco, you get to taste the reposado, you get to taste the anejo, and then we explain the differences between it. So it's a tasting and a masterclass in one, and then thereafter, obviously, we point them onto the ITA platform, where they complete the modules, and then the final exam. And we try and limit the time that they have to complete the course. I find that if there's a stopwatch, people tend to get going, and if there's not, they tend to kind of lag. They've had the masterclass, so they're like, "Yay!" So you've got to say, you've got to get online, you've got to get certified. So,
Fair enough.
but yeah, we've had some great success. We've started some collaboration now with one of the sort of high-end bottle stores in South Africa, Norman Goodfellows, where we are using their tasting rooms to host the ITA classes. They're also one of the biggest importers of tequila currently. We've also got collaboration with a lot of the local brands, the local popular brands here, or locally distributed, products like Los Locos Tequila, which is actually booming in sales now because it's a cheaper alternative to Don Julio, and it's very similar in taste. Also, it's sweet. South Africa has got quite a sweet palate. Even if you look at the cocktail scene here, it's the top selling cocktails are still the classics. The mojito, the strawberry daiquiri, the Long Island iced tea, the margarita. So, South Africans do have quite a sweet palate. So I find Los Locos is doing very, very well in the nightclub scene and the bars and pubs. And then we've got relationships with Cordolejo Tequila, which is one of my favorite tequilas as well, as sort of an entry level budget tequila, bang for your buck. It's really, really good. And then of course my personal favorite, Tequila Ocho. We work very closely with them. So we're building those relationships. Soon we're going to start working with Herradura, with Volcan, with Aljimador. So as we grow and we can, sort of continue to educate people, the industry will grow. But one of the points of focus for us is the hospitality industry. So we've actually come out with special pricing, even more reduced, which actually works out to about 50% of what the normal online fee is, specifically for hospitality students, professionals, chefs, maitre d's, wine sommeliers. We've in fact got the Spear Wine Master Vintner coming through next month, I think it is, to do a course with us. So that's quite cool, And wine and tequila is actually it's a relative sort of relationship, because there's a very strong focus in tequila on terroir, and obviously with the investment, the agricultural investment in the spirit, it does kind of lend itself to that same sort of vibe that wine has got, with terroir and climate and all of that. So that's going to be quite interesting, and I think I'll probably learn as much from him as he'll learn from me, which is always great. But yeah, the courses are great fun. It only takes up 4 hours of your time initially, which you really do enjoy. You get to taste some great tequila. You get to learn, all about the tequilas, and then and also mezcal, and the differences between the two. And then after that, they can kind of chill and go at their own pace. Obviously, within 30 days of the master class, to finish and do the online exam so that they can be certified.
Awesome. Thanks for explaining, Keegan. It's great to even learn from my point of view. So if you happen to be in South Africa, feel free to join. And if this is something that you feel like that you would have a great time with Keegan, as he just explained. I would love to go down, and maybe one day I will visit you, and then do a nice course. But till then, thanks a lot, Keegan, for joining me and explaining all of these interesting things and facts about South Africa. And for all of you guys listening, thanks for joining in. And I hope you were able to learn something from this conversation. Remember, this is Tequila Business. We don't do any drama, no politics. This is really about the craft and the industry. So if you like this type of content, feel free to subscribe to our channels, and we'll be there for you. Thanks a lot, Keegan, for being here. And
thanks, Adam. I appreciate it.
Thank you all. Cheers. See you again.
Ciao, guys. Ciao.
Bye bye.